The skies over Novaris were painted with an ominous hue as the massive Zarkonian ship descended, casting a long shadow over the human colony. The residents, who had thrived on this vibrant world, felt a collective shudder as the colossal vessel loomed above. News of its arrival spread like wildfire, igniting fear and uncertainty among the colonists. They gathered in the town square, where a hastily constructed podium awaited Commander Ilara Voss. Ilara, a fierce leader with an unwavering spirit, stood tall against the backdrop of chaos. Her dark hair whipped in the wind as she surveyed the crowd, her green eyes glinting with determination. She had always believed in the strength of her people, and now was the time to prove it. As the Zarkonian envoy emerged from the ship, a towering figure clad in glimmering armor, silence fell over the crowd. The envoy's reptilian features were accentuated by his crimson skin, and his eyes glowed with a malevolent intensity. "People of Novaris," the envoy bellowed, his voice resonating like thunder. "I am Varrock, envoy of the great warlord Korath. You have been summoned to pay tribute for the protection we offer. Submit to our rule, and your lives will be spared. Defy us, and you will face annihilation." As Varrock's words echoed through the air, murmurs of panic rippled through the crowd. Many exchanged fearful glances, while others shouted in protest. Ilara felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. This was no ordinary demand. It was an ultimatum that threatened their very existence. With a surge of resolve, Ilara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "We will not bow to tyranny. We are humans, and we will defend our home." The crowd erupted in cheers, emboldened by her defiance. Varrock's eyes narrowed, and a menacing smile curled on his lips. "You would challenge the might of the Zarkonian Empire. Foolishness. Your bravado will lead to your doom." "You underestimate us, Varrock," Ilara replied, her tone unwavering. "You want war. Prepare for a fight." The air crackled with tension as her declaration hung in the air, echoing the indomitable spirit of humanity. The crowd roared, emboldened by her words. But Ilara knew this was just the beginning. The path ahead would be treacherous, fraught with danger and uncertainty. As Varrock turned to leave, he glanced back over his shoulder, a flicker of irritation crossing his reptilian face. "You will regret this, human," he hissed before striding back toward the Zarkonian ship. The vessel's engines roared to life, casting a gust of wind that swept through the crowd, stirring the dust and debris. Ilara remained focused, knowing that the Zarkonians would not wait long to retaliate. She felt a sense of urgency pulsing through her veins. In the days to come, they would need to rally their forces and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Once the Zarkonian ship was out of sight, Ilara turned to her people, her heart swelling with pride. "We have stood together against threats before, and we will do so again. This is our home, and we will fight for it." The crowd erupted in cheers once more, their voices a chorus of defiance against the encroaching darkness. As night fell over Novaris, Ilara stood atop the podium, looking out at the stars. They had ignited a fire of resistance, and she would be damned if she let it flicker out. The fight for their future had just begun, and she was ready to lead them into the storm. The days that followed were filled with a whirlwind of activity and preparation. Ilara Voss, fueled by adrenaline and the cries of her people, convened her inner circle in the command center, a makeshift hub of technology and determination. The dimly lit room hummed with the sounds of holographic displays and the murmurs of strategists poring over maps of the surrounding systems. Each face reflected the gravity of the situation, and Ilara could feel the weight of their hopes resting on her shoulders. "We cannot face the Zarkonian Empire alone," she declared, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling around her. "We need allies, other races who have suffered under Korath's rule. If we can unite them, we'll stand a chance." "Do you think they'll listen?" asked Malik, her second in command, skepticism lacing his tone. "The Zarkonians have a reputation for brutal retribution. Many will be too afraid to act." Ilara nodded, acknowledging his concern. Fear is a powerful motivator, but it can also fuel the desire for freedom. We'll show them that resistance is possible. We'll send a message that we are not alone. With a plan in place, Ilara activated a communication beacon, broadcasting her message across the galaxy. The words poured from her heart, a call for unity, a plea for justice against the oppressed Zarkonians. Her voice echoed in the dark void of space, reaching distant worlds and alien civilizations, stirring something deep within those who had suffered in silence. Days turned into weeks as they awaited responses. Each moment felt like an eternity, and doubts began to creep in. Was her plea falling on deaf ears? Just as frustration threatened to consume her, messages of support began flooding in from unexpected sources. First came the Celethians, a proud race of warrior scholars who had long been subjugated by the Zarkonians. They offered advanced weaponry and tactical training, eager to assist in the fight against their common enemy. Then, the Exirans, a race of agile and cunning traders, pledged their vast resources to fund the coalition's efforts. Ilara felt a spark of hope ignite within her as the alliance began to take shape. Among the responses, one stood out, a message from a mysterious figure known only as Kale. The holographic image flickered to life, revealing a tall, imposing alien with sharp features and vibrant blue skin. "I am Kale, a soldier of the Zarkonian rebellion. I have witnessed their cruelty firsthand. I wish to join your cause." Ilara's heart raced at the prospect of a true insider. "What do you know about Koreth's plans?" she asked, eyes locked onto Cal's. "More than you can imagine," he replied, a shadow crossing his expression. "I can guide you to Zarkonian strongholds, help you disrupt their operations. But there's more at stake than just military might. Koreth holds a weapon that can decimate entire planets. We must act quickly." Ilara felt a chill at his words, but also an undeniable excitement. "Then let's devise a plan. Together, we'll gather our forces and strike against the Zarkonians." With Cal's insights, the coalition took shape, a diverse assembly of warriors, strategists, and survivors. Ilara watched as each race contributed their unique strengths, new technologies, advanced combat tactics, and invaluable knowledge of the Zarkonian hierarchy. The humans were no longer alone. They had formed a powerful alliance, each member embodying the shared desire for freedom and justice. As preparations escalated, Ilara found herself drawn to Kale. His fierce loyalty and deep-seated pain from his past were palpable. They shared long conversations late into the night, strategizing and planning, but also revealing pieces of their souls. With each exchange, the bond between them deepened, igniting a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. Ilara looked out over the bustling command center, filled with laughter and determination. Together, they would face the storm. With a coalition at her side, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The time for action was approaching, and she was ready to lead her people into the fight of their lives. The atmosphere on Novaris had shifted dramatically since the formation of the coalition. As the Allied forces prepared for their first coordinated strike against the Zarkonians, anticipation filled the air like static electricity before a storm. Ilara stood at the command center, surrounded by a cacophony of voices and the hum of technology. The plan was bold, and the risks were immense, but the hunger for freedom fueled their determination. Intelligence reports suggest that Koreth's forces are stationed at a supply depot just outside the Draxus Nebula, Kale announced, his holographic image flickering as he highlighted the target on the map. "If we can hit them hard, we can disrupt their operations and send a message that we're not to be trifled with." Ilara nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we'll strike at dawn. We'll split into two groups, one to attack the front gate, and another to infiltrate from the rear. I want everyone ready. This will be a decisive moment." As dawn broke over Novaris, the Allied forces gathered on the outskirts of the nebula, their ships arrayed like a fierce constellation against the dark void of space. Ilara looked out over the fleet, a diverse array of vessels adorned with the symbols of their respective races. Each ship vibrated with energy and anticipation, and the tension was palpable. The coalition was a mix of species, humans, Celethians, and Sirens, each with their own battle styles and philosophies, yet united by a common purpose. Ilara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. This is it, everyone. We fight not just for ourselves, but for every being who has suffered under the Zarkonian oppression. Together, we will show them our strength. The ship surged forward, plunging into the Draxus Nebula. Colors swirled in the cosmic mist, obscuring their approach. Ilara felt a mix of anxiety and adrenaline coursing through her. The nebula was a treacherous place, filled with ion storms and hidden asteroids, but it provided the perfect cover for their assault. As they emerged from the nebula, the Zarkonian supply depot came into view, an imposing fortress guarded by a fleet of sleek, menacing ships. Alarms blared as the Zarkonians detected the approaching coalition. Ilara's heart raced as she watched the enemy scramble to defend their stronghold. "Now," she shouted, and the coalition unleashed a barrage of laser fire. Explosions lit up the dark expanse as ships danced around each other, weaving in and out of enemy fire. Ilara's command ship soared through the chaos, her fingers flying over the controls. In the midst of the battle, Ilara caught sight of Kale aboard his ship, expertly maneuvering through the fray. His focus was unwavering as he executed a daring flanking maneuver, taking out 2 Zarkonian fighters with precision. The sight filled her with pride. Yet the danger was palpable. Suddenly, a heavy blast rocked her ship, sending alarms blaring. "Damage report," Ilara shouted, gripping the console as the ship trembled beneath her. "Shields at 70%. We've sustained minor damage to the starboard side," came the response from her engineering officer. "Reinforce the shields. We need to push forward," Ilara commanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. Just as they were gaining ground, a massive Zarkonian warship emerged from the shadows, dwarfing their coalition ships. Its cannon glowed ominously, charging for a devastating shot. "Look out!" Kel's voice echoed through the comms. But it was too late. A blinding flash erupted, and Ilara's ship was thrown violently to the side. Alarms blared as she struggled to regain control, her heart racing. The coalition forces were momentarily disoriented, but Ilara refused to back down. "Rally together. We can't let them intimidate us," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. With renewed determination, the coalition regrouped, launching a counteroffensive. Inspired by Ilara's bravery, the Allied forces pressed on, exploiting the Zarkonians' momentary confusion. Together, they fought like never before. Every shot fired a declaration of their resolve. In that moment, Ilara realized they were no longer just defending their home. They were igniting a flame of resistance that would burn across the galaxy. As they clashed with the Zarkonian forces, she felt an unyielding surge of hope. The fight had only just begun, and they would not falter. As the dust settled over the remnants of the Zarkonian supply depot, Ilara Voss stood on the bridge of her command ship, heart pounding with exhilaration. The coalition had emerged victorious, but the cost weighed heavily on her mind. Shattered wreckage floated in the aftermath of the battle, remnants of Zarkonian ships mingling with the charred remains of their own. The cheers of her crew echoed in her ears, but the sight of fallen comrades dampened her celebration. "Commander, we've intercepted a distress signal from Zarkonian forces across several systems," Kale announced, his expression serious. "They're reporting chaos and confusion. It seems our attack has sparked unrest among their ranks." "Good," Ilara replied, her mind racing. "Let's use this to our advantage. We need to fan the flames of rebellion. If we can show others that resistance is possible, we can ignite a galaxy-wide uprising." With renewed urgency, she convened the coalition's leaders on the command deck, a diverse array of beings united by a common cause. The room buzzed with energy and anxiety, each leader eager to discuss the implications of their victory. "Many of our allies have suffered under Zarkonian oppression for far too long," a Celethian general stated, his deep voice resonating in the chamber. Now is the time to rally them to our cause. We need to coordinate our efforts and make our presence known across the galaxy." Ilara nodded, feeling the weight of their mission. "We will send out teams to various systems, focusing on places with recent reports of Zarkonian activity. Our goal is to show those who are oppressed that they can rise up. We'll spread our message far and wide. We are no longer afraid." As the meeting concluded, Ilara felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. They were no longer just a band of misfits fighting for survival. They were the vanguard of a movement, a coalition ready to challenge an empire. She spent the night planning the next steps, drawing on Cal's extensive knowledge of Zarkonian operations. Together, they crafted a strategy to disrupt supply lines, sabotage key operations, and inspire uprisings. With dawn breaking, Ilara activated a communication beacon, transmitting a message to the galaxy. Her voice resonated with passion and urgency as she spoke. "To all who hear me, the Zarkonian Empire thrives on fear, but we are living proof that resistance is possible. Join us. Stand against your oppressors. Together, we can reclaim our freedom." The response was immediate. Messages poured in from across the galaxy, hopeful voices expressing support, warriors pledging allegiance, and communities eager to join the fight. Each response felt like fuel to the fire, igniting a fervor within Ilara. Days turned into weeks as the coalition launched a series of coordinated operations. Each successful mission disrupted Zarkonian supply routes, sparking uprisings in key locations. News of their victories spread like wildfire, emboldening those who had lived in fear for too long. The momentum shifted, and whispers of rebellion echoed through the cosmos. Amidst the chaos, Ilara found herself drawn to Kale. Their late-night strategy sessions evolved into discussions about their dreams and fears, forging a bond that transcended their roles as leaders. Each shared moment deepened their connection, and Ilara found herself drawn to his fierce loyalty and resolve. One evening, as they reviewed maps of Zarkonian installations, Kale looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "You've become more than just a commander to me, Ilara. You've become a symbol of hope for countless beings across the galaxy." Ilara felt her cheeks flush. "And you've been my rock through this chaos. Your knowledge and bravery have made this fight possible." As their eyes locked, the weight of the world seemed to fade away. The battle against the Zarkonians was fierce and unrelenting, but in that moment, she found solace in Cal's gaze. They were united by a cause larger than themselves, a fight for freedom that transcended the boundaries of their worlds. As the weeks progressed, the coalition's actions sparked widespread rebellion. The Zarkonian Empire was crumbling, its grip on power loosening as planets rose up. Ilara and Kale knew they had to capitalize on this momentum. With every new ally, every act of defiance, they moved closer to dismantling the tyranny that had oppressed so many for far too long. The galaxy was awakening, and Ilara Voss was at the forefront of this rebellion, ready to lead her people and their allies into the storm. The fight for freedom was far from over, but together, they would forge a path toward a brighter future. The galaxy was ablaze with rebellion, and as the coalition's forces gained momentum, the Zarkonian Empire scrambled to respond. Ilara Voss could feel the tides turning, but deep down, she knew the battle was far from over. The Zarkonians were formidable foes, and they would retaliate fiercely against any threat to their dominion. One afternoon, Ilara stood on the command deck, her gaze fixed on the swirling stars beyond the viewport. Kale joined her, sensing her apprehension. "What's on your mind?" he asked, his voice soft yet steady. "Ilara," he continued, "we can't let fear dictate our actions. We've proven that we can disrupt their operations, but we need to prepare for their counterattack. We can't afford to grow complacent." "You're right," she said, exhaling deeply. "We need to strike at the heart of the Zarkonian Empire, their command center on Korath Prime. If we can disrupt their leadership and create chaos within their ranks, it could cripple their entire operation." Kale nodded, the determination in his eyes echoing her resolve. "But it will be heavily fortified. We'll need every ship in our fleet and a well-coordinated plan." With a renewed sense of purpose, Ilara called a meeting with the coalition leaders. As they gathered around the holographic map of Korath Prime, she laid out her bold strategy. "We will initiate a two-pronged assault. One group will attack the outer defenses to draw their attention, while a smaller team infiltrates the command center. Our goal is to capture Korath's High Council and disable their communication systems." The leaders exchanged glances, weighing the risks. "This is dangerous," a Xiron commander cautioned. "If we fail, it could endanger everything we've built. Or it could change the course of the war," Ilara countered. "We have to take risks if we want to achieve our goals. This is our chance to hit them where it hurts most." After a tense silence, the coalition leaders nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting the gravity of their decision. They knew the stakes and were willing to gamble everything for the chance at freedom. As preparations began, Ilara felt a surge of adrenaline. She meticulously reviewed the plans with Kale, each detail crucial to their success. The bond between them had grown deeper through countless hours spent strategizing, and with every fleeting glance, she felt the weight of their unspoken connection. "Are you ready for this?" Kale asked, breaking the tension as they stood in front of their ships. "More than ever," Ilara replied, her heart racing. "We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for every being who has suffered under Zarkonian rule. We have to win." The night before the mission, Ilara and Kale shared a quiet moment in the command ship's observation deck. Stars twinkled in the distance, a stark contrast to the chaos that lay ahead. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Kale said, his voice barely above a whisper, "know that you've inspired countless beings to rise against their oppressors. You are a beacon of hope." Tears prickled in Ilara's eyes as she felt the weight of his words. "And you've been my anchor in this storm. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The next morning, as the coalition fleet gathered in formation, Ilara felt a fierce determination surge within her. "Let's make history," she declared, her voice strong and resolute. "For our freedom." The ships surged forward into the depths of space, guided by their collective resolve. The time for action had come. As they approached Korath Prime, Ilara could see the formidable Zarkonian defenses shimmering in the distance, a wall of destruction ready to unleash hell. With a final glance at Kel, she steeled herself for what lay ahead. The coalition was ready to face the heart of darkness itself, and she would not falter. They would dismantle the Zarkonian Empire piece by piece, fighting not just for their lives but for a future free from tyranny. The galaxy would bear witness to their courage, and Ilara Voss was determined to lead the charge into the unknown. The coalition fleet, a vibrant tapestry of ships from various races, approached Korath Prime under the cover of darkness. As they neared the planet's atmosphere, Ilara Voss felt a surge of determination coursing through her veins. Each vessel was a testament to the sacrifices and hopes of the allies who had gathered for this moment. They would strike a blow against the Zarkonian Empire and seize their future. "Prepare for descent," Ilara commanded, her voice steady. The crew moved swiftly, executing their roles with precision. On the view screen, the swirling clouds of Korath Prime loomed large, their beauty masking the tyranny that thrived beneath. Kale stood by her side, his eyes scanning the redouts. "Our infiltration team is ready. Once we breach the outer defenses, we'll create a diversion to draw their attention away from the command center." Ilara nodded, her heart racing. "Remember, we need to disable their communication systems. If we can cut them off from reinforcements, we stand a better chance." As they broke through the atmosphere, the coalition ships emerged into a chaotic scene. Zarkonian fighters buzzed like angry hornets, and anti-aircraft fire streaked toward them, illuminating the dark skies with bursts of energy. The air was charged with tension as Ilara steered her command ship into the fray. "Engage," she shouted, her voice rising above the din of alarms and explosions. The coalition unleashed their firepower, laser blasts illuminating the night as they fought to gain control. Ilara's hands danced over the controls, deftly maneuvering her ship through enemy fire. She could hear the distant cries of victory and defeat echoing through the comms, a cacophony of sounds that both thrilled and terrified her. "Look out!" Kale yelled, pointing at an incoming Zarkonian fighter. Ilara reacted instinctively, spinning her ship to evade the attack. The Zarkonian ship zipped past them, but not without receiving a swift return fire from one of their allied vessels. "Stay focused. We can't let them flank us," she commanded, rallying her crew. They needed to maintain their momentum. Every second counted. As they pressed deeper into Zarkonian territory, they'd reached the outer walls of the command center. Massive turrets lined the perimeter, and Ilara knew they had to take them out before the infiltration team could advance. "Deploy the ground troops," she ordered, her heart pounding in her chest. The coalition soldiers descended from their ships, their faces set with determination. Ilara could see the Celethians at the forefront, their combat prowess evident as they charged into battle. She felt a surge of pride watching them fight alongside her people, united in their shared cause. "Kale, it's time," Ilara said, her voice firm. "We need to initiate the distraction. Get the infiltration team to the secondary entrance. We'll keep their forces occupied." With a resolute nod, Kale activated the signal, coordinating the attack with military precision. Explosions erupted around the perimeter, drawing the Zarkonian defenders' attention away from the command center's rear. "Now," Kale shouted, leading the infiltration team toward the entrance. Ilara watched them go, her heart racing as she fought to keep the Zarkonian forces at bay. As the command ship hovered just above the battlefield, the sounds of war roared around them. Ilara focused on the task at hand, commanding her crew with clarity and purpose. Each blast fired and every maneuver executed brought them closer to their goal. But deep down, she knew the risks were greater than ever. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the command ship, and alarms blared. "Shields down to 50%. An officer reported, panic creeping into his voice. "Reinforce them," Ilara shouted. "We can't afford to lose our position now." As chaos enveloped the battlefield, Ilara's thoughts turned to the infiltration team. Were they safe? Would they succeed in their mission? She had entrusted the future of their rebellion to them, and she could only hope they would emerge victorious. The fight was far from over, but Ilara knew one thing. They would push forward, united in their struggle. Together, they would breach the Zarkonian stronghold and change the course of their destinies forever. The heart of darkness awaited them, and Ilara was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The chaos of battle surged around Ilara as she fought to maintain control of her ship amidst the growing frenzy. The air crackled with energy, and the sounds of laser fire and explosions filled her ears. Her mind raced with concern for the infiltration team, but she couldn't afford to let fear take hold. They needed her to lead them through this storm. "Commander, we're sustaining heavy fire from the Zarkonian artillery," an officer shouted over the din, urgency lacing their voice. "Redirect power to forward shields." "We can't let them breach our defenses," Ilara commanded, her heart pounding as she calculated their next move. With a grim determination, she activated a targeting sequence, aiming at a nearby Zarkonian turret that had been wreaking havoc on their forces. The ship's cannons whirred to life, and she pressed the trigger. A beam of energy shot forth, striking the turret and causing it to erupt in a brilliant explosion. Direct hit. One less turret to worry about, the officer called out, and a wave of relief washed over Ilara. But there was no time to celebrate. They were losing ground, and she could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. "Cal's team should be breaching the command center by now," she murmured, gripping the console tightly. "They need to disable the communication systems before reinforcements arrive." Just then, a comm signal broke through the static. "Ilara, this is Cal. We've reached the command center. We're planting explosives on the communication array, but we need cover." His voice was strained, the tension palpable. "We're on it," she replied, urgency igniting her resolve. We'll hold the line as long as we can. You must succeed, Cal. We can't allow the Zarkonians to call for backup." As Cal's transmission cut off, Ilara quickly relayed orders to her crew. "All ships, focus fire on the main Zarkonian forces. We need to create a diversion for the infiltration team." With the coalition ships responding to her command, a torrent of laser fire rained down on the Zarkonian front lines. Explosions rocked the battlefield as they fought fiercely to distract the enemy. The Zarkonians, realizing the threat to their command center, redirected their forces toward the coalition ships, leaving the rear vulnerable. Ilara's heart raced as she saw a burst of green light on the viewport, signaling a successful detonation from Cal's team. "We did it," an officer shouted, excitement bubbling in the control room. "Hold the line. They'll be regrouping soon," Ilara shouted, determination anchoring her resolve. Just as the words left her lips, the ground beneath them trembled violently, and a massive Zarkonian warship descended from the clouds, its ominous shadow stretching over the battlefield. "Commander, we've got a major threat," the tactical officer warned, panic creeping into their voice. "That ship is charging its weapons." Ilara's mind raced as she assessed the situation. The Zarkonians had pulled back their forces and were now rallying behind the looming warship, a fortress in itself. "Prepare to engage. We need to take out that warship before it can fire." The crew responded with practiced efficiency, their fear replaced by focus as they unleashed a barrage of fire upon the massive ship. Ilara felt the ship lurch under their assault, and the screen displayed damage reports flashing red. "Shields down to 20%. We're losing power," another officer shouted, urgency flooding the command deck. "Redirect all power to the weapons. We can't let them retaliate." Ilara barked, her voice cutting through the rising panic. As they fired again, she could feel the weight of destiny resting on her shoulders. They were fighting for something greater than themselves, a chance for freedom, and a future free from tyranny. The Coalition's victories had brought hope to countless worlds, and she refused to let that hope be extinguished. "Target the warship's main reactor," Ilara commanded, her heart pounding in her chest. "On my mark." With bated breath, the crew readied their weapons, and Ilara's finger hovered over the trigger. Now, a massive beam of energy erupted from their ship, slamming into the Zarkonian warship's reactor. The impact was catastrophic, and the warship erupted in a brilliant explosion, showering the battlefield with debris. Cheers erupted in the command deck, but Ilara knew they couldn't let their guard down. "Stay alert. This fight is far from over," she reminded her crew, her voice steady. As they regained their footing, she could feel the tides of battle shifting in their favor. The Zarkonian forces were faltering, and a new sense of hope surged through the coalition ranks. Together, they had struck a decisive blow against the Empire, but the war was far from over. Ilara knew that the fight for freedom would continue, but in that moment, she felt a flicker of optimism ignite within her. They had weathered the storm, and now they would seize the light. As the remnants of the Zarkonian warship disintegrated above Korath Prime, a wave of exhilaration washed over Ilara Voss and her crew. The Coalition had struck a decisive blow, but the battle was not yet won. Zarkonian forces, though rattled, were regrouping and fighting back with a fierce determination born of desperation. Ilara could see it on the view screen. They were preparing for one last stand. "Commander, we've got a fleet of Zarkonian ships approaching from the north," an officer shouted, their eyes wide with urgency. "They're moving to encircle us. Reinforcements are on their way, but we must hold the line until they arrive." Ilara replied, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "Prepare to engage. We need to keep them occupied." As the Coalition ships repositioned themselves, the atmosphere inside the command deck shifted. Crew members exchanged determined glances, the camaraderie forged in the heat of battle palpable. Ilara felt a rush of pride. Together, they had already accomplished the impossible. Cal's team is still inside the command center, and they're working to gather intel, Another officer reported, "We need to buy them more time. Let's give them the distraction they need," Ilara declared, her resolve hardening. "All ships, initiate evasive maneuvers. Focus fire on the approaching Zarkonian fleet." As they unleashed their firepower, Ilara's heart raced. The Coalition fleet darted around the encroaching Zarkonian ships, engaging in a fierce dogfight. Explosions lit up the sky, and she could see the determination on the faces of her crew mirrored in the battle unfolding outside. "Keep an eye on the command center. We can't afford to lose that intel." Cal's voice crackled over the comms, steady and reassuring. "We're holding strong," Ilara responded, her heart swelling with gratitude for his unwavering spirit. Just a little longer. Time felt like it stretched endlessly as they exchanged fire with the Zarkonian fleet. Lasers streaked through the air, each blast a desperate attempt to turn the tide of battle. Ilara maneuvered the ship with precision, her instincts honed through countless skirmishes. Suddenly, an alarm blared from the console, drawing her attention. "Commander, we've lost power to the aft shields. They're about to breach. Divert all remaining power to the front shields. We'll take the brunt of the impact," Ilara shouted, her heart racing. She felt the ship shudder as the Zarkonian forces unleashed a devastating volley, striking their vessel and shaking her to the core. Casualties reported on Deck 3. An officer cried, panic rising in their voice. "Stabilize that section. We need to keep moving," Ilara commanded, her focus unwavering. The stakes were too high. They had come too far to falter now. As they engaged the enemy, a burst of energy illuminated the view screen, and a group of Coalition reinforcements appeared on the horizon. Cheers erupted in the command deck. "Reinforcements have arrived," an officer announced, relief flooding their voice. "Rally the troops. We need to push forward." Ilara rallied, her spirit ignited. With the fresh forces joining their ranks, they surged against the Zarkonian fleet, the tide of battle shifting decisively in their favor. With renewed vigor, Ilara led the charge, weaving through enemy fire as she targeted Zarkonian ships. Each explosion sent a ripple of hope through the Coalition forces, emboldening them to fight harder. They were no longer just surviving. They were thriving. In the heart of the chaos, Cal's voice rang out again. "We've secured the command center. We're transmitting the gathered intel back to the fleet now." Ilara felt a surge of relief. "Excellent work, Cal. We need that information to rally the galaxy against the Empire." As the Coalition forces continued their assault, the Zarkonian fleet began to falter, their resolve crumbling under the relentless pressure. One by one, their ships fell, engulfed in explosions that lit up the battlefield like fireworks. Finally, the remaining Zarkonian ships began to retreat, a sign of their impending defeat. Cheers erupted from the Coalition crew, and Ilara felt tears of pride welling in her eyes. They had done it. They had turned the tide of the battle and delivered a decisive blow against their oppressors. As the dust settled over Korath Prime, Ilara knew this was just the beginning. The fight against the Zarkonian Empire was far from over, but they had proven that united, they could overcome any challenge. The galaxy had witnessed their courage, and now it was time to forge a future where freedom reigned. "Prepare to transmit our victory to the galaxy," Ilara instructed, her heart swelling with hope. "Let everyone know that the tide has turned. We are no longer afraid." The Coalition's victory would resonate across countless worlds, igniting a spark of rebellion and hope in those who had long suffered under tyranny. Ilara stood at the helm, ready to lead her people into a new dawn, a future filled with possibilities, unity, and the unyielding spirit of those who dared to fight for their freedom.